The universe was quiet that morning when Lieutenant Commander Riley Thompson noticed something odd on her monitoring station. She was stationed at Outpost 7, a small human listening post floating in the darkness between star systems. Most days, nothing happened. Today was different. What the hell is that? Riley muttered, adjusting her headset. A faint signal was cutting through the usual cosmic static. It wasn't random noise or some natural phenomenon. This was deliberate, structured, clearly artificial. She called over Sergeant Mike Jackson, who was supposed to be checking equipment, but was actually reading an old Earth novel. Mike, come look at this. Tell me I'm not going crazy. Mike slouched over, coffee in hand. What V you got? Listen. Riley played back the cleanup audio. A rhythmic pattern emerged, complex but clearly intentional. It's coming from a Void Garden sector. Mike's expression changed instantly. Everyone knew about the Void Gardens. It was a region of space marked with every warning the galaxy could think of. Ancient battles had been fought there. Entire civilizations had vanished. Most species wouldn't go near it if their lives depended on it. That's definitely not natural, Mike said, suddenly alert. How long has it been broadcasting? At least 3 days. Maybe longer. The signal is getting weaker, though. Riley pulled up more data. Mike, this encryption pattern, I've seen something like it before in the xenoarchaeology files. They spent the next hour running the signal through every database they had. Finally, buried in a collection of historical records, they found a match. The encryption belonged to something called the Harmony Collective. Never heard of them, Mike said. Riley had, barely. They were mentioned in some old diplomatic archives. A peaceful alliance of species that disappeared about 800 years ago. Everyone assumed they were wiped out in the border wars. The signal kept playing. Even through the static and distortion, there was something desperate about it. Someone out there was calling for help, and they'd been calling for days. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Zilani Confederation had picked up the same transmission. Unlike the humans, they knew exactly what they were hearing. The Zilani were the galaxy's diplomatic powerhouse, descendants of a species that had survived the ancient wars by being extremely careful about everything. In their grand council chambers on New Harmony Prime, hundreds of representatives from dozens of species gathered for an emergency session. The debate had been going on for 6 hours already. The signal is authentic, announced Counselor Veldar, her blue-scaled head bowed with the weight of the moment. It is indeed a Harmony Collective distress beacon. Our linguistic analysts confirm the encryption patterns match historical records perfectly. A wave of whispers swept through the assembly. The Harmony Collective had been legendary, even among the Zilani. They were the ones who had first established the principles of peaceful coexistence that modern galactic civilization was built on. If survivors exist, we have a moral obligation to rescue them, declared Elder Mordain, his crystalline form shimmering with emotion. But Counselor Yethare raised a tentacle in opposition. The Void Gardens are forbidden for good reason. 3 previous rescue attempts in that sector ended in complete disaster. We lost 17 ships and 4,000 crew members. The argument continued for hours. Some wanted immediate action. Others demanded more study. A few suggested sending unmanned probes first. The Zilani way required consensus, and consensus took time. We must consider all variables, insisted Security Chief Drachmon. The strategic implications, the safety protocols, the potential for cultural contamination. We cannot rush into this. Elder Mordain's patience was wearing thin. While we debate, people are dying out there. Better to debate than to add our own casualties to count. Yethare replied coldly. Back at Outpost 7, Riley and Mike had been monitoring the signal continuously. It was definitely getting weaker. Whatever was broadcasting wouldn't last much longer. We should report this up the chain, Mike said, though he didn't sound convinced. Riley nodded, but she kept thinking about those desperate pulses cutting through space. Someone was out there, probably scared, probably running out of time. The thought made her stomach clench. She sent the report to Earth Command, knowing it would take weeks to work its way through military bureaucracy. By then, the signal would probably be gone forever. The transmission continued its lonely broadcast into the void. On one side of the galaxy, politicians debated proper procedures and calculated risks. On the other side, a handful of humans listened to someone's cry for help and felt their consciences gnawing at them. The signal pulsed again, fainter than before. Time was running out for whoever was sending it. The question was whether anyone would be brave enough or crazy enough to answer before it was too late. In the cold mathematics of galactic politics, a proper rescue mission would require months of planning, resource allocation, and risk assessment. But mathematics had never been humanity's strongest suit. Sometimes the universe needed someone willing to act first and ask questions later. Captain Jack Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee when the alarm bells started ringing throughout the Persistence. The mining vessel shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Jack nearly spilled his drink all over the navigation console. "What's our status, Tommy?" Jack called out to his chief engineer, wiping coffee from his beard. Tom Bradley's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. "We made good time, Captain. 18 hours on the dot. But we're running on fumes now. Used up most of our fuel reserves getting here this fast." Jack nodded. It was worth it. Every hour they delayed could have meant more lives lost. That's how humans operated in the Outer Rim territories. When someone needed help, you helped them. You figured out the consequences later. Lieutenant Dave Cooper looked up from his scanner station, his face pale. "Captain, you need to see this." The main view screen flickered to life, showing what lay ahead of them. Jack had seen a lot of things in his 20 years of deep space mining, but this made him whistle low under his breath. A massive ship hung in space ahead of them, easily 10 times the size of anything humans had ever built. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals and alloys, suggesting it had been assembled by multiple species working together. But the ship was clearly dying. "Look at the size of that thing," breathed Navigator Pete Williams. "It's like a floating city." Huge sections of the hull were cracked open, venting atmosphere in ghostly streams that sparkled in the light of a nearby red giant star. The ship's rotation was all wrong, wobbling like a broken top. Worst of all, it was falling toward the star, caught in a slow death spiral. "Life signs?" Jack asked. Dave's fingers danced over his controls. "Massive readings, Captain. I'm detecting approximately 50,000 individual life forms. But here's the weird part. They're all in some kind of suspended animation. Stasis pods, maybe." Medical Officer Kate Harrison stepped onto bridge, having heard the commotion. 50,000? "Jack, our medical bay can handle maybe 20 patients at most. And that's if we're lucky." "We'll make do," Jack replied simply. It was a standard response to impossible situations. Kate laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Make do? Jack, we're a mining ship. We've got 6 crew members, limited supplies, and we're in the middle of nowhere. This isn't making do. This is suicide." Chief Engineer Tom Bradley chose that moment to arrive on the bridge, oil stains on his coveralls and a worried expression on his face. "Captain, I've been looking at our fuel situation. We got enough to get close to that ship, but not enough to get home. Not with our current load." "Then we'll dump the cargo," Jack said without hesitation. Tommy's eyes widened. "Sir, that's 6 months of platinum mining. Company's not going to be happy about losing that much profit." "Company's not here," Jack replied. "We are." This was the difference between humans and most other species in the galaxy. Other races calculated costs and benefits. They weighed risks against rewards. They formed committees and held debates. Humans just looked at a problem and asked themselves one simple question. What's the right thing to do? Pete Williams was studying the tactical display. "Captain, there's something else. That star isn't stable. I'm reading massive solar flares, and the magnetic field is fluctuating like crazy. If I had to guess, I'd say it's going to go supernova within the next day or 2. How long do we have to get those people out?" Jack asked. "Maybe 10 hours before the radiation levels become lethal. Maybe less." Kate Harrison shook her head. 10 hours to evacuate 50,000 people? That's impossible. "Only if you think like a civilized person," Jack said with a grim smile. "Good thing we're not civilized." The crew of the Persistence had all come from Earth's outer colonies. the rough frontier worlds where survival meant being tougher than your environment. They were miners, engineers, and traders who learned to make impossible things work, because giving up meant dying. Dave, Cooper started plotting an approach vector. Captain, if we come in from the shadow side, we can avoid the worst of the solar radiation, but we'll have to move fast. Define fast, Tommy said, already calculating power requirements in his head. Faster than any sane person would attempt, Dave replied. Jack looked around his bridge at his small crew. 5 people against 50,000 refugees, a dying ship, and an exploding star. The smart move would be to call for backup and wait for proper rescue vessels. But backup would take weeks to arrive, and those people would be dead in hours. All right, people, Jack announced. We're going in. Tommy, I need every bit of power you can squeeze out of those engines. Kate, start figuring out how to keep aliens alive with human medical equipment. Pete, plot us the fastest route to that ship. And if we don't make it out? Kate asked quietly. Jack's answer was simple and carried the weight of human stubbornness that had carried their species across the galaxy. Then at least we tried. The Persistence fired its engines and accelerated toward the dying ship, racing against time and physics with nothing but human determination and complete disregard for impossible odds. The Persistence shuddered as it moved closer to the massive alien ship. Captain Jack Morrison gripped his chair as another wave of radiation from the dying star washed over them. The ship's hull groaned in protest, but held together. We're getting a clearer picture now. Dave, Cooper announced from his scanner station. The ship's definitely breaking apart. I count at least 12 major hull breaches, and more appearing every few minutes. Kate Harrison was studying the life sign readings with growing concern. Jack, these readings don't make sense. I'm seeing at least 7 different species in those stasis pods. Heart rates, brain patterns, body chemistry. They're all completely different from anything in our medical databases. Can you keep them alive? Jack asked. I have no idea, but I'll figure it out. Kate's voice carried the same stubborn determination that had gotten her through medical school on a dying Earth colony. Tom Bradley's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. Captain, we got a problem. That star is putting out massive electromagnetic pulses. It's playing hell with our systems. I can keep us running, but not for long. Jack studied the tactical display. The alien ship was enormous, easily 5 miles long and 2 miles wide. It looked like someone had taken pieces from dozens of different vessels and welded them together into one massive arc. Now that arc was falling apart. Pete, how long before that thing hits the star's corona? Jack asked. Navigator Pete Williams ran the calculations twice before answering. 6 hours, maybe 7 if we're lucky. Once it hits the outer atmosphere, it's all over. And how long to evacuate 50,000 people? With our shuttle capacity? About 3 weeks minimum. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of overworked systems and the occasional groan of stress metal. The math was simple and brutal. They had 6 hours to do 3 weeks of work. Well, Jack said finally, I guess we better get creative. That was pure human thinking right there. When faced with impossible odds, humans didn't give up. They just changed the rules. Dave, start scanning for the strongest sections of that ship. We're going to cut them loose and turn them into lifeboats. Dave's eyebrows shot up. Sir, you want to use mining explosives on a ship full of people? Not on the people. Around them. Tommy, how much cutting power do our mining lasers have? Tom's voice came back immediately. Enough to slice through most hull materials. But, Captain, we'd be cutting blind. One wrong move, and we could breach a section full of refugees. Then we won't make any wrong moves. Jack's confidence was infectious, the kind of crazy certainty that made people believe impossible things might actually work. Kate was already pulling up schematics on her medical station. If we're really doing this, I need to understand their biology fast. Dave, can you scan individual pods? I need to know what we're working with. The next few hours became a carefully choreographed dance with death. The Persistence moved closer to the alien ship, dodging chunks of debris that were breaking away from the hull. Tommy pushed the engines harder than they were designed to go, while Dave mapped every section of the massive vessel. I found something, Dave announced. There are natural breakpoints in the ship's structure. Looks like it was designed to separate into smaller sections if needed, like escape pods, but huge ones. How huge? Jack asked. Each section could hold about 2,000 people. If we cut at the right spots, we might be able to turn this ship into 25 smaller vessels. It was still impossible. Even if they could cut the ship apart, they'd need to somehow get life support running in each section, navigate 25 separate vessels away from the exploding star, and figure out where to take 50,000 refugees. But humans had spent centuries doing impossible things. When Earth's environment collapsed, they built generation ships and headed for the stars. When those ships broke down, they'd cannibalize them to build space stations. When hostile aliens attacked their colonies, they'd fought back with mining equipment and sheer bloody-mindedness. All right, people, Jack announced. Here's what we're going to do. Tommy, I need you to rig our cargo containers as temporary life support modules. Kate, start figuring out how to wake up aliens safely without killing them. Dave, plot separation points for the mining charges. Pete, calculate escape vectors for each section. And what if this doesn't work? Kate asked. Jack looked around his bridge at his small crew. They were tired, scared, and completely out of their depth. They were also the only hope 50,000 people had. Then we try something else, he said simply. The star pulsed again, brighter this time. Warning lights flashed across every console as radiation levels spiked. The alien ship's orbit decayed another few thousand kilometers. Time was running out fast, but the crew of the Persistence got to work anyway. They started preparing mining charges, rerouting power systems, and planning the most audacious rescue attempt in galactic history. It went against every regulation, violated every safety protocol, and had approximately zero chance of success. It was, in other words, a perfectly human solution to an impossible problem. While other species would still be forming committees and running computer simulations, humans were already strapping on their equipment and getting ready to cut apart a 5-mile-long spaceship with mining tools. The universe was about to learn why Earth had produced survivors, and why those survivors had spread across the galaxy despite having inferior technology and shorter lifespans than most other species. Sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem was to be too stubborn to accept that it was impossible. The Zilani rescue fleet arrived just as the red giant star began showing signs of instability. Admiral Kethvar watched his sensors in disbelief as massive solar flares erupted from the star's surface, each one larger than most planets. Sir, we're detecting a small vessel near the distressed ship, reported his tactical officer. It appears to be cutting into the hull. Cutting? The Admiral's scaled features showed confusion. With what? Industrial mining lasers, sir, and they're using explosive charges. Admiral Kethvar had commanded rescue operations for over 30 years. He'd never seen anything like this. The proper protocol was to establish a safe perimeter, deploy specialized rescue craft, and carefully extract survivors using approved techniques. These newcomers were attacking the ship like pirates. Hail them immediately, he ordered. The view screen flickered, showing the bridge of what appeared to be a human mining vessel. The human captain looked tired and covered in soot, but his eyes were focused and determined. This is Captain Jack Morrison of the Persistence. The human said without preamble, we're conducting emergency rescue operations. You might want to stay back unless you're here to help. Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Kethvar of the Zilani Third Fleet. We are the proper rescue authority for this sector. You must cease your activities immediately and withdraw to a safe distance. Jack's response was a short laugh. Admiral, with respect, there is no safe distance. That stars will blow in about 4 hours, and we got 50,000 people to get out before it does. Your methods are completely unsafe, the Admiral protested. You're using explosives on a ship full of civilians. Yeah, well, safe methods would take about 3 weeks. We don't have 3 weeks. Jack's image flickered as another solar flare interfered with communications. We've already extracted 8,000 people and got them loaded onto improvised life rafts. If you want to help, we could use some cargo space. The Admiral watched his tactical display in growing amazement. The human ship was somehow carving chunks off the massive alien vessel and turning them into functional spacecraft. It was the most reckless thing he'd ever witnessed. "Sir," his aide whispered, "their techniques are working. Each section they remove maintains life support and basic navigation." Meanwhile, aboard the Persistence, the crew was pushing themselves and their equipment beyond all reasonable limits. Tom Bradley had jury-rigged their mining equipment to work as precision cutting tools, something the manufacturer would have said was impossible. "Tommy, how we doing on power?" Jack called down to engineering. "We're running everything at 150% capacity," Tom replied, sweat dripping from his forehead. "The good news is it's working. The bad news is we're probably going to blow something important real soon." In the medical bay, Kate Harrison was dealing with her own impossible situation. She'd managed to wake up representatives from 7 different alien species, and now she was trying to keep them alive with medical equipment designed for humans. "Okay, so you breathe nitrogen instead of oxygen," she muttered to a tall, gray-skinned alien who was conscious but clearly confused. "And your blood pressure is about twice what would kill a human. But you're alive, so we're doing something right." The alien, one of the Harmony Collective survivors, spoke in broken standard. You came for us. We sent signal, but we thought no one would answer." "Someone always answers," Kate said, adjusting his fore drip. "Maybe not fast enough, maybe not with the right equipment, but someone always comes." Up on the bridge, Dave Cooper was tracking their progress with growing anxiety. "Captain, we've evacuated 15,000 so far, but we're running out of time. The star's magnetic field is getting more unstable by the hour." "How unstable?" Jack asked, though he probably didn't want to know the answer. "Remember the solar flare that knocked out the Mars colony last year? This thing's putting out flares 10 times that size every few minutes." As if summoned by his words, another massive eruption burst from the star's surface. The wave of radiation hit both ships seconds later, sending sparks flying from overloaded circuits. The Zolani admiral watched in horror as the human ship continued working despite the bombardment. "Their hull should be melting," he said to no one in particular. "Sir, their ship appears to be designed for extreme conditions. According to our database, humans come from what's classified as a Class 12 death world." Death world. The admiral had heard the term, but never encountered anyone from such a place. Extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, dangerous radiation levels, frequent natural disasters. Basically, a planet that actively tries to kill anything living on it. That explained a lot. While the Zolani fleet maintained a respectful distance from the deadly radiation, the humans worked in conditions that would have killed most galactic species in minutes. Another section of the alien ship broke away, this one carrying 3,000 refugees. Tom Bradley had somehow rigged it with basic engines and a navigation beacon. It limped away from the dying star under its own power, heading for the safety coordinates the humans had programmed. 23,000 evacuated, Dave reported. 27,000 to go. Time remaining? Jack asked. 2 hours, maybe less. The star pulsed again, this time so violently that space itself seemed to ripple. The alien ship's hull began glowing red-hot from the radiation. Any normal rescue operation would have been forced to retreat, but the Persistence moved closer instead, positioning itself between the worst of the radiation and the remaining refugee sections. The human ship's hull was scarred and blackened, but it kept working. "They're using themselves as a shield," the Zolani admiral realized. "They're absorbing the radiation to protect the refugees." His tactical officer nodded grimly. "At current exposure levels, their hull will fail within the hour." "And they know this?" "They have to know it, sir." The admiral watched as a small human vessel continued its impossible rescue mission, trading its own survival for the lives of aliens they'd never met. It was either the bravest thing he'd ever seen, or the most foolish. Perhaps with humans, those were the same thing. The star's death throes were accelerating. Soon, everyone in the system would have to choose between running for safety or staying to help complete an impossible rescue. The humans had already made their choice. The Persistence limped away from the dying star, with its hull glowing like a piece of metal fresh from a forge. Captain Jack Morrison watched the red giant collapse into itself on the rear display, knowing they'd cut it closer than anyone had a right to survive. "Final count, Dave?" Jack asked, slumping back in his captain's chair. "Dave," Cooper checked his readings one more time. "All 50,000 accounted for, Captain. Last shuttle cleared the blast zone with 30 seconds to spare." The bridge erupted in exhausted cheers. Tom Bradley's voice came over the intercom from engineering, hoarse from shouting orders for the past 6 hours. "Captain, I don't know how we're still in one piece. By all rights, this ship should be a cloud of radioactive dust right now." Jack looked around at his crew. They were all running on adrenaline and stubbornness at this point. Kate Harrison had dark circles under her eyes from treating dozens of different alien species with equipment meant for humans. Pete Williams had navigated through a solar storm that should have fried their electronics. Everyone had pushed themselves beyond their limits. "So what now?" Pete asked. "We got 50,000 refugees scattered across 25 makeshift ships, and half of them don't even know where they are yet." Before Jack could answer, a new voice came over the communication system. It was Admiral Kethvar from the Zilani fleet, and he sounded different than before. Less formal, more human, somehow. "Captain Morrison, we prepared temporary quarters for the refugees on our ships. We'd like permission to begin transfers." "Granted, Admiral, and thanks." "Captain, if I may ask, why did you do this? Your ship was never designed for rescue operations. You had no obligation to these people. By all tactical assessments, what you attempted was suicide." Jack was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something that seemed obvious to him. "Admiral, someone was in trouble. We were in the area. What else were we supposed to do?" The simplicity of the answer seemed to stun the Zilani commander into silence. Over the next few days, as the refugees were slowly awakened from their centuries-long sleep, the full story began to emerge. The massive ship was called the Sanctuary, and it carried the last survivors of the Harmony Collective. Elder Drayme was the first to fully recover from stasis. She was a tall, graceful being with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. "We have been traveling for 800 years, she explained to the gathered humans and Zilani. "Our world were destroyed in the border wars. The Sanctuary was our attempt to find a new home, but our engines failed decades ago. Why didn't you send the distress signal sooner?" asked Kate, who had become the unofficial liaison between the species. "We did. We sent signals for over a century, but no one came." Drayme's large eyes focused on Jack. "We had given up hope. The younger generations were born in stasis and had never known anything but sleep. We thought we would simply drift until our power finally failed." Admiral Kethvar shifted uncomfortably. "The Void Garden sector has been quarantined for good reason. 3 previous rescue attempts resulted in total loss of life. But you came anyway," Drayme said to Jack. "Why?" Jack shrugged, that casual gesture that somehow carried the weight of human philosophy. "Because you needed help." It was Tom Bradley who put into words that everyone could understand. "Look, we're not the smartest species in the galaxy. We're not the strongest or the fastest. Hell, most of our technology is held together with spare parts and good intentions. But," Kate added, "we're too stupid to know when something's impossible." Dave, Cooper nodded. "Other species see a problem and calculate the odds. We see a problem and ask, how do we fix this?" Elder Drayme looked around the room at the mixed group of humans and Zilani. "In our archives, we have legends of a species called the Caregivers, beings who would cross any distance and face any danger to help others. We thought they were myths." "Maybe they were," Jack said, "but sometimes myths become real when people decide to make them real." The weeks that followed changed everything. The Harmony Collective's rescued survivors brought with them technology and knowledge that had been lost for centuries. But more importantly, they brought a perspective that the galaxy had forgotten. "Your species puzzles us," Admiral Kethvar admitted to Jack during one of their planning sessions. "The Zilani way is careful deliberation. We debate, we plan, we minimize risk. It has served us well for millennia." "Nothing wrong with being careful," Jack replied. But sometimes being careful means people die while you're making plans. And sometimes being reckless means everyone dies, the Admiral countered. True, but we'd rather die trying than live knowing we didn't try at all. As news of the rescue spread throughout the galaxy, something unexpected happened. Other species began asking questions they'd never asked before. Why had the humans acted when everyone else hesitated? What made a species willing to risk everything for strangers? The answer, as the rescued Elder Draymi came to understand, wasn't complex technology or superior firepower. It was something much simpler and much more dangerous. Humans didn't calculate whether someone deserved to be saved. They didn't weigh costs against benefits. They didn't form committees to study the problem. They just saw people in trouble and helped them. It was the most terrifying and wonderful thing the galaxy had ever encountered.